Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia. With me is Derek Brown, a.k.a. DBro, a.k.a. the King of Bros, and the King of the Chop, the Guillotine Master himself. Paul Charchian is going to join us. Paul is here for Week 1 Waiver Wire, and we are going to tell you who to pick up, who to drop, and all of the above. But, of course, as always, make sure you are subscribing to the podcast wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe on there, too, because we are rocking and rolling here. It is Week 1. We got one more game left. We are Week 2 in terms of adding players. But, gentlemen, we saw a lot of football yesterday. It was a glorious day. My big takeaway was Saquon Barkley. Man, he looks like he's back. That was a ferocious game for Saquon Barkley. Not perfect, but ferocious. That was great to see. Paul Charchian, you tell me, what was the biggest takeaway for you for what you saw in Sunday's games?
I think on a Sunday, I think, well, I mean, if you were to just like hang your hat on a couple of things, there was, Jonathan Taylor's still great, but I think more than anything else, it was the people that invested in a first round wide receiver got paid. I mean, that, that all, the people that weren't so myopically focused on getting running backs, those top 5 fantasy wide receivers by ADP, all big games. And that's, I think slowly we're slowly course correcting the mentality of the world out there on those first round running backs versus wideouts.
The check is in the mail, Paul. The check is in the mail. Derek Brown, what are you hanging your hat on after Week 1?
I mean, we talked about it all off season, Joe. The league winning duo of Jaylen Hurst and AJ Brown, they came to play, baby. It was beautiful. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's going to be beautiful to watch AJ Brown get 140 plus targets this year. It's such a beautiful thing to behold. And we were talking about before we kicked the cameras live here, Justin Jefferson. Come on, Charge. That baby. Usage was beautiful, baby.
It was. Now, in the case of both Jefferson and Brown, the number 2 receivers just withered on their teams. I mean, if you took Devontae Smith or Adam Thielen, I think you almost, you've got a little bit of concern right now. Do you believe that that's valid concern, or is this just going to be something where we'll look back and go, it's a blip in the radar for Week 1?
D, what do you think?
I think it's a blip in the radar. I think the Vikings are going to be so consolidated with their target share. Thielen's going to get his. If anybody, I'd be more worried about Devonta Smith because Dallas Goedert looked like the number 2 in that offense. So a little more concern on him, but I think Thielen will be fine as long as he stays healthy.
I think they'll be okay, but it's clear who the stars are. That's what I'm saying, baby. So let's kick things off here and let's talk about the top ads at all the positions. But first, I want to remind you guys, if you've got leagues, we've got tools to help you. Waiver Wire Assistant is the only tool that you'll need to make the waiver wire pickups in all your leagues all season long. And once you've synced your leagues to my playbook, like I do, like Derek does, oh my God, what a time saver. It's amazing. The Waiver Wire Assistant will present you with the best players for both next week and the rest of the season. And it's an easy way for you to move all of your pieces around and make sure you're getting the right lineup all set by the time it's go time. You can check this out at fantasypros.com/myplaybook. And remember, only premium subscribers can get the most out of Waiver Assistant. So if you're not currently a subscriber, I don't know what you're doing. What are you wasting time for? Go check it out over fantasypros.com/myplaybook. And of course, you can upgrade 6 free months if you go and make a deposit offer on fantasypros.com/offers. See how that works? Get that Waiver Wire Assistant so you can have a little bit more help even after the podcasts are done. We just never stop helping. We're just givers here at Fantasy Pros. That's what we do. So let's go to running back and give you some names here. And we've got, obviously, at the top, we've got a few names that I think are fascinating to discuss. We had some injuries as well that are going to impact some of these names, as we always do, it seems. And we definitely got some more injuries. We've been waiting all preseason for the injury bug. Well, it found us Week 1. Hooray! All right, DBro, let's start with you, buddy. Give me your number 1 RB ad, and let's talk about who that player is.
So I talked about him before the season started. We got some good news hitting the timeline on Sunday. Brian Robinson is off crutches. I think he is going to be back, and he's going to be a full go before people realize he's going to be. I'd be spending 15 to 20% of my fab. I think he's going to come back on Week 5, and I understand he might not be out there in all of your leagues, Joe, but if he is, and yes, Antonio Gibson looked great in Week 1, but Brian Robinson stole the job handedly in preseason from Antonio Gibson. Even as good as he looks, I think it's still within the range of outcomes for him to come back and take the job back. And if that's the case, we're looking at a possible RB2 sitting on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. So I want to be scooping him up.
The roster percentage for Brian Robinson is at 53%. So he's available in a lot more leagues than people realize. And I'm sure he had to get dropped by a lot of teams that had other issues and were trying to stream other guys even the last day or so. So 53% on the Sleeper app in terms of that roster. I'm with you. Brian Robinson's around. I'm picking him up. Charch, let's go to you. Who's your number one RB pickup of the week? And we'll talk to both of you, too, about how much you're willing to spend on both these guys. But who's the name, Charch, first?
Dontrell Hilliard is my top choice, rostered at only 12% of leagues. And what I love about him is you get a complete skill set. He's clearly going to catch a lot of passes in that offense. You know, they've never been comfortable throwing to Derrick Henry, but anything happens to Henry, you've also got the replacement for Derrick Henry in all probability. And I've always liked his skill set. I thought it was a little weird that Cleveland moved on to him, on from him as quickly as they did, but loved the usage. And I thought he flashed. And it wasn't just that he got into the end zone, although obviously that helps and puts him on radar. Always liked the skill set that he brings and believe that he's going to be most weeks a flexible PPR option in leagues. Dontrell.
All right. So how much you want to spend on Dontrell Hilliard? We're talking about, most of us have got a lot of budget left to spend here. We're still relatively early, unless somebody got hammered and decided to drop like the best player on their team, which, you know, things happen. Some crazy stuff in some leagues. So how much of the fab out of the 100% are you willing to spend on Hilliard?
15%, 15%. I mean, I'm not breaking the bank here,
chunk.
But yeah, that is a healthy chunk. You know, that you can't throw around 10, 15% every week, obviously. But it's week one. And I think what we saw is a trend, not a mirage.
All right. So how much are you willing to spend on Brian Robinson, DBro?
For me, it's 15 to 20% because I think that he should not be on waiver wires. If you have to in some smaller leagues and stuff and you know your league mates and get aggressive, I really have no problems going up to 25% on Brian Robinson.
What do you say to the people who are maybe having some RB issues, maybe Eli Mitchell, maybe J.K. Dobbins, and they see Robinson out there? Is that something you'd still add Robinson anyway, or are you looking for more immediate help because you just can't afford to wait necessarily?
I think you need to add him in all formats. It doesn't matter the composure of your team. I mean, if he takes this job back, it's an RB2, and people are like, well, do I spend the fab this early? And I'm like, fab is meant to be spent when players are good and they're out there and they're possibly top 24, top 36 at their position. Spend the money. I don't care if it's week 1 or week 7. Doesn't matter.
All right, let's get to number 2 on the list. Charch, we'll start with you this time. Who is your number 2 RB to add this week in week 2?
Jeff Wilson, surprisingly only rostered in 19% of leagues, which, you know, if you're the backup running back in a Kyle Shanahan offense, sooner or later you're going to get run, right? And it came really, really soon. Elijah Mitchell's been dinged up a lot through his short career, and Jeff Wilson's the next man up. He'll get a lot of use here, and it looks like at least, we don't have a full understanding of the scope of Eli Mitchell's injury yet, but it looks like it's at least a few weeks long. So, should have been on roster already as a very likely player to get time in a run-heavy offense. And now, the time is here. You've got a starting running back on a team that loves to run the ball.
He is 19% rostered. Also on Sleeper, Dontrell Hilliard, by the way, only 12% rostered. So clearly there's a lot of space for these guys still out there. They're just floating around. They're basically free for you to go grab them. It's funny because Wilson was somebody for me. That was my most added player last week. I looked around every single league that he was available. Well, because I don't think this is rocket. Well, no, but this is something that we talked about here on the podcast, which is, hey, the same thing you just mentioned, which is, okay, what's the Shanahan offense? How often do they like to move backs? The minute Trey Sermon was toast, right, and sent off on his way packing, I'm like, well, we might as well pick up Wilson because after that, we've got a rookie and some other guys. Like, I don't know who else it would be besides Jeffrey Wilson Jr. So let's just grab him just in case you have something happen. And I didn't think it was going to happen this soon. So I'm not a genius by any stretch. That's you, Charch. You're the smart guy. I'm just the guy looking at the simple facts, which is Shanahan offense, look for teams that run the football, look for the second guy, especially if the first guy is not that great to begin with. How about for you? Let's talk about your player. Jeff Wilson, by the way, is 19% rostered. So you're going to spend about 15% on him as well, Charch. That's about
15% on Jeff Wilson as well.
I mean, he has a ceiling, right? I mean, it's not like we're like super enthusiastic about Wilson, right?
Well, okay. As the starter, his ceiling's really high in that offense, right?
True.
I mean, nobody will be surprised. He's gotten goal line work through his whole career.
That's
any given game in that offense, as the go-to running back, Jeff Wilson's got 110-yard, 2-touchdown upside, I think. So that part, that part to me makes him pretty unique from among the waiver wire guys that we're going to talk about here.
All right, let's go to you, DBro. Who's your number 2 RB waiver wire ad of the week?
Charch and I are holding hands on this one.
There
I'm all in on Jeff Wilson, man. And the other thing I want to throw about Jeff Wilson, he could easily be the number 1 if Brian Robinson's not out there, or if you need help this week and you're saying I need help in the next 2 to 3 weeks over the stash. I have no problem with you bumping Wilson up to number 1 because, like Charch was talking about, he's an RB2. That is what Jeff Wilson is. He is going to run the passing downs. San Francisco already showed that they trust him on that. He played 76% of the snaps after Mitchell was out, led all their running backs with 10 routes. And Mitchell, at least from the rumblings we're hearing, probably MCL sprain. So you're looking at maybe a few weeks. And the upcoming schedule's not great, but it's not terrible considering we've seen what this looks like with Jeffrey Wilson. 15 to 20 touches. He gets the goal line work. He probably even gets the passing down work. Like Seattle, really bad against pass catching backs. Denver can be run on. The Rams can be run on. Carolina and Atlanta. So, yeah, Jeff Wilson is basically, you're picking up an RB2 that you could start right now in the next 2 to 3 weeks as long as Mitchell is out. So I love that call by Charch.
What's the same spend for you? Is it 15 as well? Or are you willing to go more?
It's 15. I mean, I'm willing to go up to 20, 25% if you need an RB2 right now because we still don't know about Mitchell. Worse news could come out and he could be out for even longer. We just don't know right now. So I'm okay with you being aggressive because the other part of this is even when he comes back, the 49ers could say, look, you've been banged up a ton, both already this season, last season. Jeff Wilson could have a standalone role as the goal line back in 10 to 12 touches weekly anyway, even after Eli Mitchell comes back. So I think bid aggressively. You get an RB2 now, and maybe down the line, Mitchell comes back. He's still going to be a high-end flex play.
Yeah, I like that. The touchdown equity has always been good for Wilson there. All right, let's go to number 3 guy here, DBro, who is number 3 on the waiver wire ad list for RB for you.
If you were listening to this podcast and you were watching,
it's true. I know this guy already.
I'm telling you that we were talking about him. He was free Alexander Madison in drafts. This is who this was. And if you don't have him now, you need to spend up now and get him. It's Jaylen Warren, baby. 10 to 15% of fab. I'm willing to go even higher than that if you need to, like 17, 20%. Because, again, we don't know what's going on with Najee Harris. It sounds like a high ankle sprain. Because that's probably going to put him out, if that's the case, multiple weeks. And
look, remember when Saquon had it, how long it took him to be right? Forget about coming back. About being
all year.
Right, all year.
Like, you come back too soon, it just doesn't heal.
I mean, the thing about it is Jaylen Warren was Najee. He played all the snaps after Najee left. And I get that Pittsburgh doesn't look sexy on paper. We want volume in fantasy, and Jaylen Warren's going to get it. Volume is king, and Jaylen Warren is a king you need to be picking up off of the waiver wire. Next few matchups look pretty good on paper, actually. New England, Cleveland, the Jets, Buffalo, Tampa, Miami. Each one of those defenses you can either run on or they have susceptibilities against passing down backs. I love Warren in the preseason. You sure already have him on your team, but if you don't, you have to pick him up this week.
Yeah, agreed. And what's the spend on him, you said, between 10 and 15?
10 and 15, I'm willing to go up to 20%, and whether it's deeper formats or you have Najee, then it's fine. Be aggressive. Get him on your team.
Well, clearly, just like in Derek Brown's house, where his kids don't listen to him, no one else does on Sleeper either, because he is only 7% rostered. So just 7% rostered over on the Sleeper app. All right, let's go to you here, Charch. Give me your third guy to add at RB.
It's not nearly as enthusiastic as Derek is for Jaylen Warren, but I'm going Jamaal Williams. You get a shocking number of touches considering how inefficient he was last year. I really did not expect Jamaal Williams to get his hands on the ball 12 times in the course of this game, but the real clincher was on both of the goal line carries that Jamaal Williams got, and he scored on both, so why change anything? Those were preceded by dynamic big gains by DeAndre Swift, and they didn't stay with the hot hand. They very intentionally followed up big gains by Swift by giving the ball at the stripe to Williams. He made good on that. And these touchdowns, these short touchdowns, are going to come pretty easily with that great offensive line that they've got up front. It was great to see Frank Ragnow able to play. And this is no fluke. And the fact that he converted both of these is only going to cement it with the coaching staff that they're going to get paid on these Williams carries. Mm-hmm. And it's a total intangible. And I shiver every time anybody tries to take anything fantasy out of Hard Knocks. But Jamaal Williams is an awfully likable dude, and you can see why they would love him in the locker room. And I think the coaches want to reward part of who he is as a person. And I think that may just be a tiny intangible that also goes towards Jamaal Williams. So he's my number 3. He is rostered in only he's
45%,
which is more than I thought he would be. Rostered 45%. I would bid up to 10%. I wouldn't go higher than that for a touchdown dependent player, but I would go up to 10% on Jamaal Williams.
Well, another guy, too, that if something happened to Swift, all of a sudden, potentially a lot more workload. So he does have a little bit more. If you're in a deeper league and he's still available, maybe that's something to consider. Or if you're really hard up at RB. Some other RBs worth adding, and I know, DBro, you felt similarly to Jamaal Williams, so we won't spend too much more time there. So that's 2 for 2 for the guys today about Jamaal Williams being that guy right around the 3rd or 4th guy to pick up. Kenneth Gainwell, 61% rostered on Sleeper. Rex Burkhead, who saw a lot of field time, certainly he is 14% rostered. Khalil Herbert still just 47% rostered. I don't know why. Again, I just don't. I mean, I shouldn't be so incredulous. It's only week 2, but I can't help it. I'm Italian. And then Kenyon Drake, 15% rostered as well. Also, you've got Tyrion Davis-Price, Jordan Mason. Let's talk about these guys because TDP is 19% rostered. Jordan Mason, 4% rostered. So you tell me, DBro, because I know you've been talking a lot about TDP throughout the offseason. Are you spending any money on these guys?
I will. I mean, look, we know what San Francisco 49er dart throw lottery ticket running backs look like. I mean, they have massive upside. Jeff Wilson, again, he's dealt with his own injuries throughout his career. So, come on, guys. Haven't we seen this play out before? San Francisco has injuries, gets to the 3rd, 4th running back on the depth chart, and we're all like, wee! Got him on waivers. So yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, pick up TDP if he's out there. If you're in deeper leagues, pick up Mason. Mason was active in first week and TDP was not. I think that's because of Mason's special teams role and he could play that. So Tyrion Davis-Price, I actually think is probably the favorite to work in tandem with Jeff Wilson. Similar skill sets, but I think if anything, Tyrion Davis-Price could be the early down complement while Wilson takes all the passing work. But both of these guys, pick them up if they're out there. We've seen the upside. We know what this looks like. You're not going to have to spend a ton to get either one of those guys. Like, you could probably get them for 5-6% in any one of your leagues, and you're probably going to be bidding over people, and that's not enough. Well, that's plenty to spend, but it feels kind of cheap considering the upside that either one of them could have.
Yeah, it's just wild, man. I mean, Kyle Shanahan annually now drafts a running back in the draft and then decides to have him inactive week 1. I don't know how he gets away with this stuff. Charch, out of those names too that we just went through, there was Gainwell, the guys from San Fran, Burkhead, Khalil Herbert, Drake. Who would be the one guy that was left on that waiver wire that you want to pluck off?
Burkhead. And it looked disheartening for all of us that love Dameon Pierce and have been following. This was not the outcome I wanted at all. I'm heavily invested in Dameon Pierce, like many of us are. But the reality is, Burkhead was a big part of that offense, and I'm buying on this offense. And I believe Davis Mills is a legitimate NFL quarterback, and this offense is going to be materially better than what we saw last year. And we already saw some signs of that already. Not only do you get the 14 rushing attempts out of Burkhead, how about 8 targets to Burkhead? We thought the passing game part would be there. I really thought Pierce would lead the way in rushes by a lot. Burkhead would lead in receptions, but 8 targets in week 1, second only to Brandon Cooks. Burkhead belongs on rosters because even if Dameon Pierce does what we think he's going to do and eventually take that running back role, I don't think the receptions are going anywhere. Those are going to continue going to Burkhead in PPR leagues. He belongs on roster.
Let's move over to wide receivers. Let's start with the number 1 ad for you, Charch, at the wide receiver position for week 2 in the NFL.
Josh Palmer, loved him in the preseason, and now we've got a Keenan Allen injury that looks to be multi-week, and Palmer figures to be the next guy up, and I say that with a little question mark in my voice because, man, did they throw the ball around to a lot of people in this first game, and I really would have guessed that Palmer would have been a bigger part of this, and
Imagine how Mike Williams feels.
Yeah, right. Mike Williams had 2 catches for 10 yards. Palmer had 3 for 5. So we're projecting a little bit here, but I gotta believe that we're gonna see a lot less of the Carter McKittles or McKitties and the Horvaths this time around. Going forward, our starters are gonna see more of the ball here. Josh Palmer is still available in a lot of leagues. Let's go with more precisely. He's only rostered 29% of leagues. Wow. So I loved him to begin with. I was drafting him everywhere. So I'm willing to pay up on Palmer anyhow. So I've got 20% on Josh Palmer, which might feel like a lot for a lot of people, and especially coming off a 5-yard game. But, man, give me a starter in that Chargers passing game, and I'm very interested.
See, I'm with you. That's a guy to be aggressive on. And Osborne and Palmer, those were my 2 favorite late wide receiver pickup, because I felt like if somebody gets hurt ahead of them, all of a sudden there's an enormous, a big jump in terms of what potential volume would be. So Palmer makes a ton of sense to me, and I'm with you. I'd rather be aggressive and get him, because I think Keenan Allen's going to be out for a while here. This seems like something that could linger. So let's go to you here, DBro. Who is your number 1 waiver wire wide receiver for week 2?
Well, it's not that I don't like Josh Palmer. I'm a little bit lower on him, or at least I was in the preseason. So I've got 2 guys above him, although he still makes my list. My first guy is Jarvis Landry, and I get he might not be out there. I see he's rostered in 65% of sleeper leagues, but if he is, you need to pick him up. And there's really not a lot of wide receivers, because I see a lot of different guys that if I miss on one of these guys, like Landry, my 2nd, 3rd, 4th pickup, then I feel pretty good about one of these guys. I'll look at all of them in the same kind of tier this week. So wide receiver is not a position that I'm going to spend up. I'm going to use my fab on running backs this week. So I'm a little bit light, like 5 to 7, 5 to 10% on Landry. Although I do like him. We saw him soak up a 26% target share. He was in on 97% of the passing attempts. And the thing that I want to point out about him is the upcoming matchups for New Orleans Saints. You have Tampa Bay, you have Carolina, and you have Minnesota. The outside corners for these defenses are a lot better than the interior nickel guys. So I think Landry, I will not be surprised if we're walking into week 5 and he's quietly leading the team in targets. So if he's out there, pick him up.
65% rostered on sleeper, and you're going to spend how much on Landry?
I mean, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 5-10%. Like, I'm not busting the bank, because again, we're going to roll through a bunch of these guys. I like them all pretty similarly. So if I miss out on one guy, I'll just take the other guy for cheap.
All right, who's the next guy then for you, DBro? Who's number 2 in the wide receiver list to add?
DJ Chark, and not a name that I thought I was going to be talking about after week 1, but considering coming off the injury, we didn't know what his snap count was going to look like. He played a ton, 97% of route participation, 21% target share in week 1. And crazy to say, this Detroit Lions offense looks really good after week 1. I mean, we talked about it all offseason, Joe. And again, 5 to 10%. If I don't get Landry, if I don't get Chark, bunch of guys I like below them. But some good matchups upcoming for Chark. I mean, they get Washington Commanders, they get Vikings, and they get Seattle. So, again, some teams that you can throw on. And I'm not going to be surprised if Chark is a good, strong wide receiver 3 during that stretch. So, another player that I like a lot.
Okay, so Chark is 46% rostered, and you're going to spend between 5 and 10 on him as well. Let's go to you, Charch. Who's your number 2 wide receiver ad of the week?
About a third of the way through Sunday, Joe, Derek, I tweeted the best looking player to this point of Sunday's slate is Curtis Samuel. He was eye popping when they went to him early and often. Yeah. I'm like, whoa, this is the real Curtis Samuel. Not the guy that we saw in fits and spurts last year trying to play hurt. A reminder about Curtis Samuel. We don't have to go that far back. Just the season before last. From week 7 forward, which is a pretty long sample size, he was wide receiver roughly 12, depending on your scoring system. They used him all over the place that season, and now that was in Carolina. Now Washington getting paid back on some of the big salary that they gave him, and they used him copiously. They didn't keep using him the way they did earlier in the day on Sunday, but I loved what I saw. All the crazy game-breaking stuff that he's got, so elusive, the speed, it was all on display. You forget that Curtis Samuel, when healthy, it's a really special, unique wide receiver. And I love the version that we saw. Carson Wentz continuing to show the crazy upside and downside in one game that's been a lot of his career. But with that upside comes opportunity for Curtis Samuel on the field a lot. I don't have snap counts yet, but I've just eyeballing it. I saw him a lot on the field. I think the usage is going to be there, and I like Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, and he is 12% rostered. How much are you willing to spend on Curtis Samuel?
10%, and it's only because we had that stretch. We know he can be a fantasy contributor. We know he can score points. They ran him a bunch in Carolina. It'd be interesting to see if they do a little of that in Washington here. So yeah, I'm willing to spend up a little bit, 10% on Curtis Samuel.
All right, Charch.
Feel free to disagree, by the way, Derek, because not everybody's on board with Curtis Samuel.
I'm not going to disagree.
I don't think he's going to. I think he likes him. Tell me about your third guy, and then we'll go back to you, DBro, because I know you got a couple guys that are kind of tied at 3, basically.
I'm going to go Devin Duvernay as my next guy up. Now, the 2 touchdowns makes it a little bit obvious, but for all of us that thought Isaiah Likely was just going to turn into the number 2, apparently we need to slow our roll on that, take a little bit and give the rookie a little bit more time. They both walked away with 4 targets, but one of them turned it into 54 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the other guy didn't catch a pass. So Duvernay, we didn't know what to expect as a young player with a lot of opportunity. But at the end of the day, even if I don't think he's the most skillful player out that they could possibly put out there, opportunity counts for a lot. And Duvernay made good on his opportunity. Ended up catching 4 balls, and Bateman only caught the 1. At one point, Duvernay looked like he might have the more impactful game. So yeah, Devin Duvernay, I think he belongs on rosters. Lamar Jackson and the whole team came off a weird rushing game where they barely ran the ball. But nevertheless, I think Duvernay should be rostered. And while I wouldn't break the bank for him, I'd pay maybe 5% for Devin Duvernay, who is owned in just 20% of leagues.
Yeah, that's certainly a guy who is available. Let's just put it that way. I can't believe he's actually more rostered than Curtis Samuel. That was kind of eye-opening.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
When you saw that. That was one. If you asked me that question, I would say, nah, people still love the Curtis Samuel hype. Really not. I mean, if Devin Duvernay is rostered more than you were up until now, then that's saying something. All right, DBro, let's talk about some of the guys that you have in this next cluster here for you, because you have some guys that are right around that 5 to 7% spend, but I know for you they're a little bit tighter.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Palmer's number 3 on my list. Agree with all Charch's points, 5 to 10% on him. The 2 guys that are fighting and duking it out for number 4, one is Curtis Samuel and then Jahan Dotson. I like both of these players, and really, again, flat tier for me, 5 to 10% on either one of these guys. If you're leaning one of those guys, I agree with Charch on this one. I would be prioritizing Samuel $1 or 2 more over Jahan Dotson, because for all the points that Charch made, but Samuel, I mean, he operated as basically dollar store Deebo Samuel. He got 4 carries on the ground. His ADOT was 1. He's going to get a lot
Deebo.
of short. I mean, that's what he is. He got carries on the ground, and it's true. It's true. He got carries on the ground, and when we're talking about the 3rd or 4th option in a Carson Wentz-led offense, it's kind of scary, but what helps Curtis Samuel is those carries. So every single week, if he gets carries, say even a handful, 4 to 7 carries on the ground every single week, it's going to help his floor and help his ceiling, which Jahan Dotson, that's the differentiator. He's not getting those. Even though Jahan Dotson, we're looking at his usage, 97% of routes, he ran one on the passing attempts, 12% target share, and that's the big thing. I get that he came down with the 2 touchdowns, and everybody's going to gravitate to that. But what I care outside of routes is I want to see target share. And Curtis Samuel demanded it and got the rushing attempts. So he needs to be the priority guy over Dotson, although I think they're pretty close to the same tier, and I'm willing to spend in a similar amount for both of them.
So the guys have really talked about some of the similar players here. Oh, real quick, Charch, I just want to get your thoughts on Jahan Dotson too, because I read somebody, I forget who it was, put it on Twitter. So, these things escape me sometimes, but they said that next year people are going to draft Jahan Dotson ahead of Terry McLaurin. Do you think that's a little bit of a hot take right now? Think we got to slow that roll?
I think it's a little bit of a hot take.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hot take.
2 touchdowns will help with that, but Terry McLaurin's got the track record. I wouldn't mess with that. But, obviously a promising start. How many rookies, like history of the league, how many rookies have scored, rookie wide receivers have scored 2 touchdowns in their first NFL game?
Charch, you're going to give me homework. I'm going to have to go look this up.
Oh, if you challenge Derek Brown, the next thing you know, you don't see him for 3 days.
Get out Pro Football Reference and make that happen, Derek.
That's the point. Is like Dotson to me was one of these guys that looked so polished and NFL ready, and everything just looked right, and people wanted to ding him, but I would say if you're looking back at the college career, let's not forget that all the quarterbacks got hurt that year around him. How is he supposed to have that big year at Penn State with no quarter? He's playing with a 4-string quarterback some days. It was crazy. So I don't think it was really fair, to look at too much of his film from last year in college. Instead, you go look at the combine. That's a guy where the combine mattered more. And I think that's something that now you're seeing that in the NFL level. So it's certainly nice to see. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Let's talk about a guy you want to add, Derek Brown. Who are you adding for next week at the quarterback position if you need one, or maybe you are the person who lost Dak Prescott and you are very upset this morning?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're only 1 week into the season, so a lot of different outcomes. You're probably fine with the quarterbacks you have, but if you do have Dak and you were riding on Dak to carry you to the promised land, I would say I'd be picking a Matt Ryan. And again, not breaking the bank for him, like 2 to 5%. I mean, really, if you lose or you lost Dak, you're probably just going to be streaming. So is Matt Ryan going to be a guy that you need to sit here and, break the bank or spend 10% in a one quarterback league? No, that's not going to happen. So I'd say 2%. He's rostered in 42% of sleeper leagues. I mean, he gets the Jacksonville Jaguars, which we just saw Carson Wentz torch them for 313 and 4 touchdowns. So if Carson Wentz can do it, I fully believe Matt Ryan can.
I won the bet. Ryan had 2 more points than Lawrence. Am I seeing this correct? Right? I think that's true.
Sounds right.
And if not, I'm just going to pretend it is anyway. So heck with it.
Well, sure.
Let's go to you. Charch, how about for you at the quarterback position? Who's a guy that you think is worth adding? Maybe even a deeper league if we're talking about some of the QBs that are out there.
Yeah, QB2, super flex, or you're in a pinch. How about a guy whose final 6 games of last year was QB 14 and is available in, if I'm doing my math right here, 86% of leagues right now, and then came out and slung a very tidy 240 yards and 2 touchdowns with no interceptions last week. That is Davis Mills. My guy, you mentioned earlier, love this Houston offense to get better. I am a Davis Mills proponent. I believe he is requisite of this job. Get this. I mean, and I mentioned the last 6 starts of last year, this guy had touchdowns in every game, had multiple touchdowns in every game but once, just went 2 touchdowns. He's surrounded by ascending talent in Nico Collins, Brandon Cooks, Dameon Pierce. This whole offense is going to get better. I want the trigger man for that. Derek says he'd go 2% on Matt Ryan. I'm going 3% on Davis Mills.
Yeah.
I'm popping him. I'm going 3%
That's
on
right.
Davis Mills.
Be excited, everybody. And thank you for using the word proponent instead of the word stan, because I'm so sick of, if I could take the word stan and the phrase RB dead zone and light them on fire in a pit, I would do that right now.
I would have no words left to say then, Joe. What are you? What am I?
Why do you think I want to do it? All right, let's move on.
I love it.
Let's move on. Real quick, is there any other quarterback for either of you guys that you think?
Well, I think we have to talk about Carson Wentz, don't we?
I
got one more. Outside of Wentz, yeah.
I feel like, the eye-popping box scores, 4 touchdowns and 300 yards, right? So feels like elephant in the room. So, we know that he can fill a fantasy box score. And I think sometimes we look at real life and go, we see him make those horrible plays. And, it's
their Jared Goff syndrome, right, Charch?
Yeah. We're like, God, I don't want that guy on my team. But at the end of the day, his fantasy numbers are generally pretty good, including, was it 32 touchdowns last year for Carson Wentz? So, yeah, I guess, not a big surprise here. Maybe this Washington offense is a little better than we expected. Played the Jaguars, so we'll put an asterisk on it, but it probably belongs on rosters.
Okay, fair enough. Carson Wentz getting a little love here on the pod today. Let's give some love to the tight end position. I know a lot of people were searching for some tight ends because George Kittle was out, and now, of course, Dalton Schultz has lost Dak Prescott. A lot of panic is setting in on our Discord. I can tell you a lot of questions about what do I do with CeeDee Lamb? What do I do with Dalton Schultz? And it's going to be a long therapy session this afternoon at some point, I'm sure. So let's start with you here, Charch. Who is the tight end that you think can actually help some folks out?
I had 4 that I think are valid, but if I'm going to
let's do the list, baby. Let's go.
All right. Well, the ones I didn't choose, Gerald Everett, who I like a lot, Robert Tonyan, who was surprisingly active and looked nimble, and then OJ Howard just granted it was 2 touchdowns and he's not going to produce a lot more. He's be a low volume guy, but Hayden Hurst was the guy that really jumped out to me. Plenty of looks, not a ton of production, plenty of looks, including in the end zone, and I like that part. And T. Higgins right now is a bit of a question mark, maybe concussion. Hayden Hurst is a part of a very good offense, and we've seen him perform at a reasonably high level in the past. So, yeah, I like Hayden Hurst. We'll take a Bengals starting tight end. Joe Burrow.
Well, you have some Bengals starting tight ends last year. CJ had a couple of smash games, if you all recall. So, I mean, maybe if you get one of those, maybe that kind of helps you out if Kittle's injury still lingers. How about for you? I know Gerald Everett is one of your guys. Hurst is available, by the way, in 21%. Rostered in 21% of leagues. Charch is throwing a couple bucks on him. Now, Gerald Everett is the guy that you want to talk about and highlight, right, DBro?
Yeah, Everett's my top guy. I'm willing to go 5 to 7% because I think he could be a top 12, top 10 kind of guy the rest of the season, regardless of Allen's injury. Obviously, if Keenan's going to miss some time, he gets a bump there. He's only rostered in 34% of sleeper leagues, and if you've been listening to the podcast, you should already have him on your team. But if you don't, that's fine. It's okay. I mean, considering he was the tight end 4 in week 1, Joe. So they get the Giants, they get the Saints, they get Arizona. We're looking at either good matchups versus the tight end or some potential possible shootouts. I know his target share wasn't massive. He's sitting around 12% in week 1, but we expect that to probably bump. So if he gets into the 15% range, maybe a tad higher as the main option behind Austin Eckler, maybe Big Mike. If we don't know what happened to Mike Williams. He's kind of on the side of milk cartons right now, but we're looking for him. But if he doesn't come back, Gerald Everett's going to get even more targets. So the number one guy that I want to talk about, yeah, definitely. I love Charch's call of Hurst too, because he was number 2 on my list.
All right, there you have it. So once again, a nice consensus. We love a good consensus here at Fantasy Pros. We do. Big ECR people. Let's go to look. You don't get a lot of this on the show, but Charch actually has some kicker love. So, I mean, we got time. So let's do it. Charch, give me a kicker that you want to add this week.
How about a kicker? It's available in 96% of leagues, is now on an ascending, already high-powered offense, and just set the all-time team record for field goal length yesterday. That is Greg Joseph, Minnesota Vikings kicker, knocking him in training camp on a regular basis from the 60s. And then when they needed a 56-yarder, they trotted him right out, made it with ease in this game. If you believe the Vikings offense is better under Kevin O'Connell's direction than it was under Mike Zimmer's direction.
Yes, I do.
I think we all do right now.
Yes.
And this looks like a potentially top 5, top 7-ish offense. Greg Joseph is going to have a lot of opportunities, and he's got the leg to hammer home the deep ones. Available 96% of leagues. Consider a kicker switch, people.
All right, let's hammer home a streaming defense of the week, DBro. Who you got that fits the bill in week 2?
Well, moving away from Greg the Leg of the Great North, this is, again, Joe, we're talking about, we discuss this every single time we did a mock draft, and you were like, we got to draft defenses, and I was like, okay, fine. Then I'm just going to keep taking
That's exactly
the
how
Browns.
I said it, by the way. I totally recall saying it that
way. It was. It's exactly what I hear every time I read the Slack message.
And you always made fun of me when I would go around early on defense and then take a Joshua Palmer after, or or Jeffrey Wilson Jr. after that. Who's laughing now, Brown? Who's laughing now?
That's fair. That's fair. But look, still in on the Cleveland Browns defense. They're only rostered in 22% of leagues. They get the Jets. We've talked about their schedule upcoming in the early part of the year. We get Greedy Williams back in a few weeks. I think this is still going to be one of the best defenses in the NFL. So pick up the Browns. They should be, I mean, if you pick them up as a streamer, you're probably not going to have to drop them for the next few weeks. So definitely like their schedule upcoming.
All right. Give me a quick answer to this question. What's going to be a bigger number this week? Number of shows that I host here at Fantasy Pros or Joe Flacco pass attempts?
Shows? I'm going to go with shows.
Probably shows. Probably shows.
Taking the over.
That's great. I wouldn't have it any other way. If one Joe gets a lot of volume, it's going to be this Joe. This is the Joe right now. All right. So for those of you who obviously are not playing in leagues with Fab, we always like to list everybody out for you too, in case you're trying to put waiver wire priorities. So Charch, run down your top 5 ads of the week for folks who are trying to figure out where they are in the totem pole right now of waiver wire pickup.
Josh Palmer, number 1. Dontrell Hilliard, number 2. Jeff Wilson, 3. Curtis Samuel, 4. And rounding out my top 5, Jamaal Williams.
All right, very good top 5 there. Derek Brown, who's your top 5 as you're running through the overall waiver wire process?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it. It's running back week for me. So Brian Robinson's number 1. If you want to go Jeffrey Wilson number 1, I get it. No problems with that if you need somebody for the next 2 to 3 weeks. But it's B-Rob is 1, Jeff Wilson 2, Jaylen Warren is number 3, and then my top 2 wide receivers are making the back end of this cut. So Jarvis Landry and DJ Chark.
Okay, let's play a little game, shall we, boys? And then we'll hit a mailbag question, get out of here. Let's play a little keep or drop. These roster percentages for these players are all from the Sleeper app. We'll start with Mike Davis. Everybody ran to the waiver wire as fast as they could to get Mike Davis. He is rostered at now 38%. Hey, look, we all have our moments. 38% rostered right now. Charch, are you keeping him or are you dropping him? Some good names out there. We just rattled off a lot of interesting names.
I'd rather have virtually everybody we talked about. So therefore drop. But let me just mention this. Kenyon Drake did nothing to suggest that he should maintain the carry advantage that he had, and we really don't know the time frame for Dobbins. So there's still a chance that Davis emerges with enough use, but I'd rather have all the running backs we've talked about.
See, and that's the point I was trying to make with this. Like, just because you added this guy and you think he might have some more, run if J.K. Dobbins misses more time, listen to what Charch is telling you. He's telling you these guys out there are better and could potentially more opportunities, more fantasy points. DBro, keep or drop Mike Davis.
Drop. I mean, it's got to tell you something that Kenyon Drake just now arrived on the team not even a few weeks ago, and he already played ahead of Mike Davis. Yeah. We've seen this story play out, Joe. Mike Davis is a jag. Drop.
I can hear Gus Edwards on the treadmill right now trying to get ready. Tyler Allgeier, running back for the Atlanta Falcons. I know he was a very well-liked fella around draft time. Well, he was not well-liked for this game. He was not playing. So 45% roster still. DBro, would you keep or drop him this week considering what's out there? It's a tough one.
So until we get kind of clarity on Damian Williams' injury, I'm going to keep him for now. And it depends on what your waiver wire looks like. Like if you have all these other options sitting out there, drop him in a heartbeat for any one of those top 3 running backs. But if they are gone, then I would keep him.
Tyler Allgeier for you, Charch. What are you doing?
Same exact sentiment. I want to see what's up with Williams, but we have not heard the last of Tyler Allgeier. And being deactivated as a rookie in your first game is no crime. And this is the way it goes for a lot of what are ultimately very good rookies. So I'm not going to panic here. And they cannot give Cordero Patterson the kind of workload that they did last Sunday.
Old people like us can't possibly carry. I mean, what are they doing? What are they? This man, like he is so good. I mean, talk about a sell high candidate. Maybe we got to talk about him tomorrow on the show. All right, how about Isaiah Spiller? Let's stick with a theme. He's 46% rostered. A lot of people kind of look holding the bag. I saw Sony Michel get some moments in that game yesterday. Charch, are you keeping or dropping Isaiah Spiller?
Easiest call so far. I believe this is a drop on Spiller, who looked nondescript in the preseason, was not able to beat out Joshua Kelly. He's the third running back clearly here. And hopefully the third running back on this team. Even that's not necessarily clear. I'm out on Kelly.
DBro, are you out too?
Yeah. I mean, we got to drop Spiller. I mean, considering what we've seen so far, the fact that the injury, the fact that he's fallen down the depth chart is sad. It makes me sad because I had a lot of preseason love for him, but we have to adjust people. Drop him.
Okay, I've got 2 more for you, and they both play for the Green Bay Packers, and they're both playing wide receiver, or at least I've been told that's their position. Sammy Watkins and Christian Watson. 42% rostered for Sammy Watkins, 40% rostered for Watson. Watkins, are you keeping one? You keeping both? DBro, what are you doing?
There's no way in hell I would even picked up Sammy Watkins, so I don't have to worry about dropping him. But if you did, bye, gone, see ya. Week 1 Hall of Fame, he couldn't even pull that off? No. Christian Watson, is the 1 week. Need to keep Christian Watson. He already ran snaps and routes with the starters. I know it didn't show up in the box score. I get everybody wants to talk about the drop. Can we also talk about the fact that he burnt the corner to a crisp?
Sure. Can we also talk about all the drops he had in college too? You want to talk about that too?
We talk about that too.
Savage.
We talk about that too. I mean, hey, we can also talk about the fact that Aaron Rodgers is so stubborn that he deserved the loss that he got yesterday.
Whoa, Charch, I know loves that. He is Minnesota pride, so he's not going to argue that fact.
No, I'll tell you, it felt a little good to see the body language on Aaron Rodgers, who basically at the point of that drop, which was the first snap of the game for their offense. he looked like he was unraveling on the field, and he
dead
was
to me.
He,
That's what
yeah.
that was the look. It's always the dead to me look. It's like,
Yes.
one moment.
Did you see Za'Darius Smith go give him a little love tap after
that
one of the
was
plays
fun.
too? He was Rodgers came up and Za'Darius was like, "What's up, man?"
Well, he tried to block him on that one play, and it was like, "Look, man, I give you a lot of credit."
Don't do that, Rodgers. That's not going to end well, man.
Not only did he do it, but he did it with his throwing shoulder. I was like, "What are you doing? Why are you
Not good.
throwing shoulder into Za'Darius Smith? I don't understand." Charch, is Watkins or Watson for you worth keeping at 40?
Well, I think Watson is. I got way more run than I thought he was. Everybody's going to Derek's point, everybody's going to focus on the drop, which was horrific, but it's his first game of his rookie year, and he was on the field a ton. So, you know what? Coming off of a basically missing really all of the offseason and the preseason, the fact that he was on the field this much tells me plenty. I'm keeping Watson. Watkins is dead to us, of course. If you can't do it here in this spot, it's over.
I'd be buying all the Allen Lazard I could wherever I could.
Now's a great time to buy low on Lazard.
Get all the Lazard right now, everybody. That brings us to our sleeper sponsored pickup of the week for the waiver wire in week 2 of the NFL. And I am going to be going with Jeffrey Wilson Jr., running back of the San Francisco 49ers. He is rostered in roughly 19% of leagues over on Sleeper right now. And with Eli Mitchell slated to miss probably about 2 months of time, as the news were breaking right here this afternoon, Jeffrey Wilson Jr. has experience in the Shanahan offense. He has successful moments in the Shanahan offense. And right now, he is the main back that's going to be featured theoretically going forward until one of the other backs prove that they are ready for time in this offense. But so far, for the next few weeks, I think Jeffrey Wilson Jr. is that guy for you to be adding this week. And now you could be even more aggressive than you were. Maybe roster him, I would say, in all of your leagues if you can. Not to mention probably bid, I would say, aggressively as well. And you can join the 4 million players already on the #1 fantasy football platform by going to sleeper.com or downloading the app to your Apple or Android device today. And now let's hit the mailbag before we head out for the day. All right, let's hit our listener mailbag, and let's go with Garindin, who wants to know, would any of you drop either Tyler Allgeier or Eno Benjamin to pick up Isaiah Likely? My only tight end is Njoku. I think we like some of the other tight ends better. So I guess the question is, let's throw them in the mix too. You dropping Allgeier for Everett, some of the other guys that we heard, Hayden Hurst, who we also discussed. Is that Allgeier or Eno Benjamin is off the island for you? Which one? Derek?
Yeah, I mean, Hurst and Everett would definitely be candidates. I'd be picking them up and dropping both of those running backs. Isaiah Likely, no. I was not on the Likely train. I'm not on the Likely train. I will not be on the Likely train. I'm sorry. I don't have a lot of love for tight ends that run 4.8s. Sorry, not sorry.
Charch, how about you?
I am on the Likely train, by the way, but it's going to take time, and we don't got time for that around here. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it might be next year. Do not drop Eno Benjamin. The guy he's looked totally legit. I know for everybody who's written him off to this point of their career, and maybe you didn't see him in the preseason, watching him run, granted, it was predominantly in garbage time, but Benjamin looks good. I would not drop Benjamin off my team right now. And there's going to be some point at which James Conner comes up gimpy, and you'll be glad to have Eno Benjamin on your team.
There you have it. All right. This has been a good time, everybody. We hope you've enjoyed the pod. And of course, if you want to get some of your questions answered on the podcast, go join our Discord. It's free to join, fantasypros.com/chat. That's how you do it. And of course, if you remember the offers I talked about, fantasypros.com/offers, when you make a deposit offer and then you get 6 free months of all the upscale stuff here at Fantasy Pros, the premium products. You also get access to our premium Discord stuff, which has our stages, our AMAs, all the stuff where we interact with everybody, which are super fun. Wednesday nights with Boggin and myself, usually you get Derek Brown, who drops by as well. It is a good time.
Don't worry.
Tell you, grab a beer, talk football with us, man. It is a great time. And once again, you get access to all the upper tier tools on My Playbook too. And you can see what those are at My Playbook over at fantasypros.com, My Playbook. And don't forget, the waiver wire assistant is available for you as well. You sync up your teams using My Playbook. Next thing you know, you get all sorts of roster advice. You get roster advice from the waiver assistant, who to add, who to drop, and how to manage those teams. And especially if you're playing, and I know you're listening to the pod, chances are you got more than one league, but even if you just have one, it's a huge help because you want to win every league you can, at least get to the playoffs. That's what you want to do. And speaking of fun leagues, if you haven't already joined a guillotine league, I don't know what you're waiting for, because guillotine leagues are super fun. I'm surviving the cut for week 1 in the team that I'm in with Charch. I'm very excited about you just don't want to be the first person out, because that's like embarrassing. That's the one where you just walk yourself out of the room backwards.
Joe be happy to be the second person out.
The Homer Simpson into the bushes, right?
The Homer Simpson into the bushes beam. That's exactly. You know what? Second is fine. Nobody remembers who's second out. They remember who's the last person standing and the first person out. That's how it works. You're not first, you're last. But Charch, tell everybody right now. I mean, sure, this guillotine league's still available. People can get in, right?
Yeah, right. You know, now it's at 17 weeks and 17 teams. So you start with as many weeks as there are left in the season, and then no head-to-head. Instead, the low-scoring team each week gets cut from the league, and their entire roster goes to the waiver wire. So it's total pandemonium on the waiver wire. Amazing. You've got to manage your fab. Do you go heavily all in when great players coming off bad weeks? Which, by the way, how many great players were there with coming off bad weeks this week?
There's a fair amount.
Very true.
Right? It's a fair amount.
There are going to be some amazing people hitting the waiver wire, and now you got to figure out when do I spend my fab? Do I go in on? God, give me a CD Lamb coming off a whatever 2-catch game.
Mike Williams.
Mike Williams would be a nice player. I'm sure he's floating around a lot of those guillotine leagues.
Yeah,
Derrick Henry, baby, too.
Yeah, go to guillotineleagues.com. Everybody, check it out. Follow Charch on Twitter at Paul Charchian. Paul, it is always so great to hang out with you and talk football. You're such a fun guy. You're such a smart guy to hang out with, and we're just grateful you made time with us. Especially, it's week 2. We're just coming off the first couple games. We know how busy you are, so I want to thank you for hanging out with us today. And of course, as always, make sure you subscribe to the pod wherever you get your pods, and don't forget to find us on all the social media platforms too, on TikTok, on Instagram, on the Twitter machine at FantasyPros. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can watch every single live stream. DBro and I were doing the AMA Sunday morning live stream. We had game day at noon, going through some of the biggest topics to get you set up. Crushed a lot of those AMAs over on 11 a.m. Eastern, which is when that was running. So check that out. But again, subscribe to YouTube and click that little bell for notifications so you know when these things drop, because we know you have a life. But really, you have a fantasy team, first and foremost. That's the thing you got. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Paul Charchian and Derek Brown, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.